materials following the call. And with that, I'll turn the presentation over to Chris. Take it away.
Thank you, Lisa. All right, so let's get started. Thanks everyone for coming today. Today we're going to get into effective partner engagement. And we're going to talk about some common mistakes that channel professionals tend to make in running and in growing their channel incentive programs. So a little about me. I'm a longtime product marketing and channel person. I've built and run channels and alliances in the software as a service, enterprise, telecom spaces in the past, and now I have the luck and I guess the blessing of getting to provide software management tools for channel professionals. Little fun fact: I am a rare fan of both the Lakers and the Warriors, having grown up in Southern California and now live in Northern California, and that's something that tends to bewilder and anger numerous family members and friends. So a little about Revitas. Revitas has been around for about 27 years. One of the original pioneers in incentives management, really specializing with deep experience in complex channel-intensive industries, whether that's hardware manufacturing, software, consumer packaged goods, higher-end professional services. And our clients, a lot in the Fortune 1000, Fortune 500, but a lot of smaller ones too. So here's what I'll cover. So we're going to talk about, to get started, we'll talk a little about incentives and the key role they play and how incentives use is evolving a little bit recently. And then I'll get into these top 10 pitfalls to avoid and some tips along the way for you. So this truly is a pretty exciting time, I think, to be running channel, whether it's channel overall or channel marketing. And incentives have really become table stakes for a competitive channel program. And they add a lot of operational and data management complexity to running your channel. So channel marketers especially are enjoying a time with a lot more authority over operational aspects of the program and spend, but with that authority comes a lot of responsibility, and that's especially true, I think, with incentives management. We'll talk about that. All right, so let's get into some of these pitfalls. I'm a big Indiana Jones fan, so maybe we'll have a little fun with this. Treating incentive payments as bonus money is something that we see is pretty common. Coming running channels myself, one of the things I was prone to early on was thinking of commission payments as that reliable, counted upon stream of money going out to my partners, and that incentives were more kind of funny money, right, that we could play with and do creative things with. And to a certain extent, that's absolutely true, especially for short-term incentives. But keep in mind that most partners are SMBs, with an emphasis definitely on the S side of the SMB. So every dollar matters to these guys. And as much as they can, they need to be able to plan around this money. Okay, so make sure with a combination of effective communications, effective partner portal, that your partners are getting regular visibility, transparency, status alerts that are keeping them aware of their progress towards goal, especially on earned spiff and rebates. Another real pitfall that I see channel professionals make, and that I was guilty of early in my career as well, is underestimating the importance of payment speed. Okay, how quickly you reward them is huge, and it's something that to this day I'll say that most channel organizations don't think much about, but it's huge. So think Pavlov, right? A core part of the research, that the behavioral research that Pavlov did was around the importance of timing of that reward to shape behavior. And it's no different in human behavior. And there's been a fair amount of human research on the phenomenon of temporal discounting in the last few years. This is the phenomenon where, as time goes on, the impact of an incentive, in the time from when they earn the incentive to when they get paid out, the impact of that incentive declines precipitously, to the point where the difference between paying a reward quickly and paying it, a few months later makes the difference between a big return on your investment, a big bump to partner engagement, or simply throwing that money away. So, this is something we've known through studies, but we've been doing a lot of actual partner research on this topic. And we did a joint survey with the BAPTI organization not too long ago, talking about the impact of the speed of payments. And it came up huge. And I recommend taking a look at that document if you have a chance. These folks are counting on these funds, as I said before, and they've got to make that connection between their action and their reward. And what we see is that partners often get checks in the mail, 3 months after they've earned something, 6 months after they've earned something, to the point where they don't even know what the money is for. They're just getting a mysterious check in the mail from a vendor, right? Don't let that happen. Another one is that I was guilty of in my channel career at times, and that I still see folks miscalculating, I think, is this phenomenon of bringing a knife to a gunfight, basically using the wrong tool for a given business objective when you're designing the incentive that's going to drive the impact that you want. So, more complex, tiered, longer-term rebate structures absolutely have their place, but for shorter-term objectives, remember to keep it simple. If you can't explain the gist of a short-term, salesperson-oriented channel incentive in a concise single sentence, rethink it, redesign it, okay? These folks are busy, and they need it to be simple. So I threw together a little chart here just as a, we won't go through this whole thing, but, I do recommend, maybe using this as a cheat sheet for how to structure different approaches and what to use, right? So in the short term, think about using spiffs more. And discounts can be an effective tool, but be careful with them. I've got an asterisk here. By discounts in both columns. Discounts are something that can be effective in getting some substantial engagement for certain things, but you've got to be very careful that you're not eroding your price point in the market, that you're not undercutting your partners, and that you're not hitting the overall profitability of the product too much. And so if you're going to do discounts, you've got to really do your homework and make sure that they are going to work for your product organization as well as your partner organization. And I put some notes in here about different business drivers, right? That you want to think about in both cases. And something that I'll be talking about at the BAPTI conference next week that is especially important here, if you look down at the bottom right box, I talk about the importance of customer sat and net promoter scores, especially in SaaS-based businesses and other recurring revenue model businesses. And let's be honest. I mean, who's not at least a little bit in the recurring revenue selling model in the channel now? I mean, even the hardware players are there. So we'll talk more about that topic next week. Okay, here's a really common one, and that is using spreadsheets to manage your incentives and payments. So, I will admit that I was guilty of this in my channel career early on, and in going out and talking to channel professionals, it is shockingly common to see channel teams using a spreadsheet to manage all their incentive information. I can't tell you how common that is in small channel programs. And how shockingly, how common it can be for even larger channel programs. And the general narrative goes something like this. It's a very consistent pattern that we see. And this is what I went through too, right? You start experimenting with incentives at a level that you can't really justify getting a system for doing it, right? And you can't really do this too well on ERP, or can't do it at all on CRM, really. So you start running your channel data on a spreadsheet, and your incentive programs grow as your channel organization grows. And that spreadsheet becomes really important, and you've got that thing, dialed in. You know how to use it, but as the spend goes up, as your geos expand, that spreadsheet becomes a ball and chain for someone who has to manage it, and a bottleneck for everyone else that needs information from it. Okay, it's a shared thing. It's sitting on somebody's computer. People are afraid to share it out because they're afraid of someone messing up the numbers. And there is a lot of money on the line. There are partner relationships on the line with that document, right? So, even if you don't have budget to do real channel data management in the cloud, I mean, at least get it, onto something where you can have kind of shared ownership of the document. So, Google Docs are a nice model. They have some security issues. I'm not going to necessarily recommend that, but get it out of a spreadsheet in some way as a first step. Another real common pitfall we see is the general lack of knowledge about compliance and regulation frameworks. Okay, the reality is that channel programs move a lot of money around the world. Okay, and the folks running channel are usually not CFOs, right? It just adds a lot of financial complexity to running a channel program, and often the folks that are running the channel, that's a scary and risky thing because that's just not your thing, right? You're a sales professional, you're a marketing professional, you're a business development professional. So it's really important to use some kind of system that can help cover you for things like GAAP rules. It's generally accepted accounting principles, right? Sarbanes-Oxley, where you need that paper trail for financial accountability. FASB, guiding top line revenue reporting, whether it's OPEX or Contra. Robinson-Patman Act, right? Anti-price discrimination. This is why partner programs have tiers. At least it's one of the basic reasons why partner programs should have tiers. So just make sure your systems support compliance with these things. All right, another real common one we see, especially when kind of looking at, in hindsight, back at programs that you've already run and learning this the hard way, is that incentives often can interfere or conflict with each other, especially for large organizations that are running a lot of these things around the world, and where you've got product-oriented initiatives that are pushing certain products, done at the same time with discounts being run in certain, to promote new, activity in new geos or into new vertical areas. So, what we see, especially with big channel players, is that there are often many cooks in the kitchen between sales teams, marketing groups, product groups, folks in direct versus indirect, all trying to run incentives and discounts. And you've got to get these things onto a single global platform that centralizes your management of these things and allows for regional execution flexibility. Because the fact is, nobody knows better how to engage in a certain geo or in a certain industry than the folks that are actually in the trenches in those things. And so you need a platform that allows for a certain measure of centralized visibility and control, but allows for a lot of flexibility to stand these things up in theater as they're needed. All right? Avoid that cancellation effect where one promotion is at odds with another, and it's very common. Margin erosion is another real common phenomenon that we often see people not giving enough thought to in the design phase of channel incentives. So you got to ask the question when you're thinking about what incentives and promotions you're going to be running in the next fiscal year, do you know the impact of these incentives on each product's profitability and margin? Okay, don't stand these things up and have to say sorry later when the product or finance team is down your neck because you just removed the profitability of a given product. And this is a pretty serious one that we see a number of channel organizations realize when it's too late. And they run the numbers and they add up all the incentives and promotions and find out that they're actually selling the product for a loss, and they have been for the last 2 years. Okay, don't put yourself in that position. Run the numbers up front, get buy-in from the product and finance teams before designing and launching. All right, lack of recognition and trophy value is another mistake we take, okay? So cash is king for most of the time. And when you ask partners what they want, they will usually tell you they want cash, okay? However, we do encourage you to mix in other reward types. And points programs, I think I would say for the last 5 years have been more and more important. Points programs were traditionally the domain of really the top channel companies, and that has quickly changed, I would say, just in the last year or two. Companies are now moving into a place, channel companies, channel manufacturers and providers are finding themselves in a place where point systems have become a crucial tool in incentivizing partners. Because you can create a loyalty system, not unlike your United Airlines loyalty system, where you can incentivize not only post-sale activities, which is really kind of the rich getting richer, but instead you can guide new and reward new behaviors that are going to lead to long-term success, right? So points systems allow you to reward for, leading indicators like, who's taking place in this partner training. Can I reward people for getting certified in something, right? With some kind of spiff, with some kind of point system, and then can those points get that partner to another tier in and of themselves, aside from earned revenue, so that you are shaping and guiding not only your existing channel partners that are paying the bills today, but the partners that are going to be paying the bills 5 years from now. Okay. I think another real common one that is especially important today is, and this is something that I still see a lot of top channel organizations kind of not making the leap to yet, even in the SaaS field, and even in some recurring product model industries, is the mistake of only rewarding first-time sales in your incentive approach. Okay, hey, that's great for net new ads, and a lot of us have, you know, net new customer metrics on our head, and that's an important metric. Okay, but in a recurring, long-term subscription model world, your profitability hinges on how long you're going to keep that end customer and keep that partner in a place where they're able to have their partners around them for a long time. That long-term loyalty. So in this type of environment, you've got to make sure that you have a mix of incentives that are rewarding not just first-time sales, but also how are they serving that end customer over the long haul? Are they doing the things they need to do to ensure a high renewal rate at the end of each year? And renewal rates and end customer satisfaction, net promoter score are becoming central in partner scorecarding and in structuring your tiered programs for folks to move up. And incentives are no exception to this, okay? So really think about how you're going to incent partners over the long term. You know, when I first got into SaaS, one of the first conversations I had was with my brother, who works in the insurance business. And that business model was very interesting to me, because the model was, you get into that industry and you're going to have some lean years up front because the margins are lower. But over time, you're going to build up a book of recurring business. And it's just a matter of maintaining that recurring business. And then, you know, in 20 years, if you do a good job of that, you can be playing golf half the time, right? But it's lean up front, okay? And it doesn't mean that he is, you know, checking out after 20 years. He still has to manage those ongoing relationships and make sure that people are happy. But he had to learn both the sales side of things and the customer loyalty and long-term relationship management side as well. And so your partners are no different in that respect. And this is especially true for MSPs and system integrators, right? These companies that are usually selling almost 100% subscription-based products, okay? You know, and what we see when you're not executing incentives properly is this kind of pain chain. And this is something that I've, you know, experienced firsthand in my experience working with channel, and that I try to help people avoid, which is you've got CAMs out visiting partners. You're spending a lot of money to fly these guys around, spend quality time with partners, do joint planning. But then they come back and you find out that half the conversation time was spent on damage control, talking about how, you know, and they're coming back with angry stories about how they've just gotten laid into by a partner because they're not getting the incentive payments that they expected to get, or those incentive payments are wrong, right? So they bring back these frustrations to the channel marketing and channel operations team. And what happens there? Well, you turn around and you point your fingers at finance, right? That's what I've tended to do. And then finance comes back and says, you know, we've got a million other things going on. And you don't want to find yourself in a feud with the channel organization. You don't want to get in a negative dynamic with them. You will usually lose that feud. So really, this stuff is really important in providing a platform for long-term success of your program. Okay. So again, just to recap, don't bring a knife to a gunfight. Use the right channel incentive structure for the given situation. Keep it simple, especially for short-term incentives. Pay quickly and accurately. Okay. Time is money, literally, with incentive payments. Get off of the spreadsheet. Okay. Unchain that poor soul that's managing that Excel doc for you. Get them onto some kind of cloud-based system. Automate incentive calculations and claims. And incent not just on first-time revenue, but on ongoing renewals performance. Okay, here are some nice resources that I really recommend checking out. And we'll update the deck here to have the exact link for this, but we did a really interesting Voice of the Partner survey with Rod Bapty recently. Incentive programs, what do they really want? Also, we've got a great white paper on regulatory and expense considerations that we got from Serious Decisions. I recommend asking them about it. It's a really nice primer. There's a great study out there published by Deloitte talking about a lot of the things that I'm talking about today. So when channel incentives backfire, strategies to reduce gray market risk and improve profitability. So another thing that I didn't really talk about today, but channel programs run on spreadsheets open themselves up to a lot of gray market risk where there's actual channel fraud, and it's not a too uncommon thing, especially in hardware. So be careful about that. I really recommend finding this paper. If you Google, Deloitte incentives backfire or something, you'll find it. And then next week at the Channel Focus, I'm going to be talking about. I'm really drilling in on that phenomenon of partner churn and through partner, meaning end customer churn, and talking about how to measure churn, how to manage for it, both in the context of partner loyalty, but also end customer loyalty. So that's the end of my presentation. I guess we can open up for questions, Lisa.
All right. Well, thank you. Pardon me. Thank you very much, Chris. We will now open it up for questions. If you would like to ask a question, you may do so using the chat window located in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. You can also raise your hand using the raise hand button. So we'll give people a second or two to get their questions in. All right. We have a question coming in. This is from Eileen, and she said, you mentioned co-op and MDF in the list of incentive strategy options. What exactly is the difference between the two?
Sure, that's a good question, a pretty common question. So, incentive, I put MDF and co-op in there as one incentives approach. MDF and co-op are similar channel investment models. They're both at the core. What they're about is providing funds to help a partner go to market. But how that's done, how that's executed, can be done kind of in a more automated way and a more a more hands-on way, and often MDF is something that's done to larger partners only. So co-op is not too unlike a rebate, kind of an elaborate rebate, really. It's rewarding back based on prior sales performance. It's kind of automatically calculating a percentage of that total revenue amount to be refunded back to the partner. So it's kind of like a rebate in that way, but that refunded money is only allowed to be used for a specific menu of go-to-market activities and out-of-pocket spend. So that's what co-op is, and that's kind of a more traditional model. And it's, you know, if you're going to do one just to start out, it's a good place to start as you're growing a program. Now, larger channel organizations with a well-qualified staff and with some bandwidth tend to evolve that model into MDF. And MDF is where, instead of just rewarding a certain percentage to be used towards a set menu of things, it's more hands-on with partners. So you're going to partners and saying, if I gave you some money to help you go to market, what would you do with it? Give me a business plan for what you would do with this money, with some money, and I'll review it, and I will, and we'll review it internally, and we'll probably give you some suggestions on how to tweak it a little bit. And then once we arrive at something we can both agree upon, it's basically, we basically hit a contractual agreement that says, okay, if you do these things on this timeline and you show me this proof of performance, we will give you this money, usually in the form of claims after the fact.
Okay, great. Well, we have a couple more questions that did come in. Catherine asks, what types of spiffs do you feel work best in a recurring business model? She's found that discounts and free trials are not super successful.
Right. So in a recurring model, what we find is the most effective and I think operationally simple way to incentivize is regularly get your hands on what each partner's renewal rate performance is, okay, and set up either a points-based or cash-based reward system to reward heavily on that metric, right? That's a really important one that you need to be tracking and capturing. Another one is the customer SAT performance and Net Promoter Score performance. And this one can be a trickier one to operationalize because it's not easy to go directly to partners and customers, and get that kind of data in a way that doesn't, ruffle the feathers of some partners, right? And in a way that is not going to be tampered with by the partner or influenced by the partner, right? But that data is gold if you can get it. And if you're in a SaaS software business, you have the luxury of being able to expose end customer SAT surveys directly through your SaaS platform in a way that's only shown to certain users and that avoids any kind of influence or tampering from the partner. And so, I think SaaS organizations have a built-in advantage to do that easily. If you're in the hardware business, you're going to have to do a little bit more legwork. You're going to have to socialize this type of program. You're going to have to build it into the rules of your program. You're going to have to say, okay, if you're going to be this certain level of partner with us, you're going to have to agree that we are going to send out, Net Promoter Score type customer SAT surveys to end customers on a regular basis, and that the outcome data from that is going to be a factor in where we place you in our partner tiers, or at least in what kind of incentives that you're going to get access to. That's not easy to do. It's not easy to pull off operationally, but I would argue that it's if you're not in software, it's not an easy thing to do. But even if you are in hardware, it's a very worthwhile thing to do to really cultivate a subscription-based model effectively over time.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Catherine says thank you as well. Chris asks, could you elaborate a bit on how a relationship with a partner is negatively impacted when commission funds are not released right away?
Yeah. So the way that they're negatively impacted is that, if you're paying commission funds at the company level, um, you know, like I said before, most partner organizations literally live, um, they're operating kind of paycheck to paycheck, so to speak, right? They are very much a cash in, cash out organization, and every penny matters, and every penny gets factored into keeping the lights on and keeping things going. And if incentive payments are being counted on by a partner, and they are not, or commission payments, and they're not being received quickly and on time, you're putting the partner in danger of, not being able to balance the books on a monthly basis. That's the kind of tight margin business that partners exist in. So you've got to be really respectful of that. And, in talking with partners, there was just a huge amount of frustration when payments went beyond a week or two late. And what goes for commission payments just as much goes for incentive payments, especially ones that are, longer term incentive payments.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris, for answering, and thank you, Chris, for asking. All right. Next question. Deandra asks, do you have any best practices on how to structure and manage measuring CSAT?
Yes, absolutely. So there is, and I'm actually drilling into this a little bit more in my presentation at BAPTI next week. If you want to reach out to me, I'm more than happy to send you I have some guides on how to structure a CSAT survey for Net Promoter Score. And that's a really powerful way to get an indication of where they are. So, boy, that's a big topic. But, one thing I think, one tip, there's a number of different survey platforms you can choose from. There are different kind of point grading scales to use, but keep it simple and keep it consistent, right? Make sure, but also you've got to kind of tailor your surveys to different partner types, but don't overcomplicate things, right? So try to pull your partner types into a top 2 or 3 and give them surveys that are appropriate for their business model. With a couple of questions that are true for all your partners across the board. That's a big topic. I'm more than happy to kind of go offline and talk about some of the strategies you can use for that.
Okay. Pardon me. All right. Richard asks, what is your opinion on the effectiveness of partner rebates in the form of credit note versus paper check?
Yeah, so I'm not a huge fan of paper check because operationally they're a big pain in the neck for a channel program. Mailing them out. So, if you've got a global program, you should expect that some of them will get lost in the mail. So you're going to have someone fielding requests for replacement paper checks. I'm a big fan of electronic payment if you can pull it off. The other benefit, of course, is that electronic payments get in the hands of your partners instantaneously instead of, several weeks via snail mail. As much as you can, I recommend moving away from checks.
All right. Thank you, Richard and Chris, both. All right. Hold on. Richard wrote back, by paper check, he meant a cash payout, not literally a check.
Oh, okay. Got it. So, yeah, okay, sorry. So, yeah, credit, I think that's, absolutely. So a credit can be a good way to go. It limits their options back into your program. So I like that approach. That's similar to the mentality around MDF, right? Where you're prescribing a certain menu of things that the partner can reinvest back in your program as opposed to something else or somebody else's program. So I like the idea.
Okay, great. All right, next one comes from Christina, and she asks, what is the minimum incentive spend to move from a spreadsheet to a system, given the cost of these platforms?
It's a good question. We have found that, yeah, the incentive spend, it's Serious Decisions actually has some really good best practice white papers on that topic, actually. So I'm not going to try to steal their fire, but generally speaking, I mean, if you've got, if you're moving into a place where you're spending, over $1 million, you're certainly moving into territory for an online system. I think that's a good baseline threshold. Beyond that, there's different incentive types have certain thresholds depending on the size of your program and the amount of revenue you're doing through the program. So, for example, MDF, there are some nicely established tiers that I'm happy to share more information about that kind of guide you on how to kind of, know when you need an MDF system. With incentives, it's usually, we generally recommend get an incentive system going first, and then graduate into an MDF system over time as that program grows, as you're growing your program. So yeah, that's another big topic, and I'm happy to discuss further offline.
Okay, great. And Christine, if you have any questions on that, you can get together with me as well, and I can get you in touch with Chris. Next question. We have lots of great questions coming in today. Next question is from Sarah. She asks, can you recommend the ROI tools for MDF? Not the proof of performance of the activity, but the actual ROI against the investment.
That's a good question. So the ROI of MDF programs and the measurement of your ROI on MDF programs is a really common topic these days. And, a lot of CMOs are looking at the balance sheets of their channel program and saying, why is MDF the only category here without some kind of ROI metric associated with it, right? And, the solution to that is having an end-to-end system that really automates the process of planning out MDF to claiming on it and then measuring it out to its effectiveness. And one great leading indicator that I strongly recommend channel professionals do in measuring MDF impact is measuring the ratio between MDF spend per partner and deal registrations, either by number of deal registrations or by total size of those registrations. That's a great kind of short-term indicator to go by to get a sense of what's moving the needle and what's not with an MDF program. And then, for the longer term, a lot of these kind of IT domain, go-to-markets are really kind of 2-year life cycles. And so I think you've got to have an arsenal for being able to measure short-term impact, but also you got to be measuring things, after that full life cycle, in more of a kind of a 1-year or 2-year, depending on your your average sales cycle, in the 1-year or 2-year iteration that's looking at actual closed revenue.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sarah, for your question. We're going to go back to Chris again. Might you have any best practices on the use of a partner survey to gauge potential incentive ideas?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and again, this is something I'm more than happy to talk about one-on-one if somebody wants to chat about it. Um, this is this is a meaty topic. You know, there's a number of ways that, depending on what survey system you use, you know, whether it's SurveyMonkey, whether it's something more advanced than that, you know, it's just a matter of kind of putting out there, you know, kind of real life pictures of what you are considering doing, and letting them rate them on a scale of desirability from, you know, 1 to 5 or something like that. You know, and let them prioritize. Another great way to do that is give them a list of options, and do a forced rank kind of question, right? Have them rank what their most desirable, second most desirable. You know, that kind of questioning approach can be really effective.
Okay, great. And thank you, Chris and Chris. Looks like we have one more question here. This is from Virginia, and Virginia asks, we are currently migrating from a regional incentive points-based program to a global program.
Right.
Obviously, there are a lot of complexities with having one program globally, regional and country legalities, different partner structure by regions, et cetera.
Yeah.
Any recommendations on where to start?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a good move that, you know, during a global expansion, you're using a point system, because a point system helps dramatically reduce a lot of the you know, the currency complexity that you would otherwise have to deal with. And so I think, you know, the fact that you're already on a point system is a great place to start. Now, in terms of scaling that, you know, you've got to make sure that you've got a central software platform that's managing those points, whatever you're using for that. You've got to have something that is a centralized system, but, you know, gives people the ability to use those point schemes in a way that works in their region. And sometimes you're going to need to tie, you know, if you're going to, occasionally, I think in going global, you're going to have regions that want to approach incentives in a unique way and may not, you know, want to use a pure payment model. Maybe they want to tie points to merchandise payouts and other things. And so, you know, you probably want to think about, are there some regional incentive services players that you can bring on board and partner with that can provide kind of the hands-on, you know, support and merchandise dispersal, you know, in theater, right? To simplify that. And, you know, there are some companies that do, you know, they're more, you know, heavily into that side of incentives management. You know, we don't do a lot of that kind of, you know, merchandise-oriented stuff. But, you know, if that's the game, then you're going to need to kind of reach out and find some folks that have kind of a global footprint in doing that. I think another way that's really a great way to get points programs effective globally is with the use of reloadable debit cards, you know, that can pay out in the partner's local currency, right? And so your points can, you know, you can assign a certain dollar value to a point, and that way it can be claimed, you know, in theater in their currency. So big fan of reloadable debit cards.
Okay, well, thank you, Virginia, for that question. That's a great idea. I think that's wonderful for a point-based system, especially, again, with their own currency. That's quite brilliant. Thank you, Chris. All right. We did have one other question, which is, will we be sharing the webinar? And the answer is yes, we will be sharing it. It'll be up in the community later on this afternoon. And first, I'd like to thank Chris for offering your time and sharing all of your knowledge with us. And folks, if you will be at Channel Focus North America next week, we would love to see you. Stop by and say hello to us at BAPTI. And I'm sure Chris would love to engage in conversation regarding incentives and how to better your programs. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for attending. Do please take a few moments to fill out your post-event survey. Your input is very important to us. This does conclude the webinar. You may now disconnect. Thank you again, Chris.
Thank you.